Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Ask Valor Masterminds podcast, brought to you by Advanced Services and Fuse Networks. My name's Galen.
I'm Joe.
We're coming at you from the Creative Block in Seattle, a new location we're so proud to be at and everything, and thanks, Mark, for having us. So, Joe, to our new listeners and viewers kind of tuning in or listening for the first time, how do we start this whole thing?
Sure. So it first started out as a Facebook group page where the purpose was to bring on, just bring businesses together to kind of communicate and talk with one another, share tips, ask questions, just kind of help one another out. And being that we're in marketing, we get asked a lot of questions from clients outside of marketing.
Right.
So we thought, what a better way than to combine that into a podcast to bring on different guest speakers like Sarah to kind of share her knowledge with our audience, and hopefully a business owner can grow from it, both in their business and personally.
Awesome. And today's actually our 88th episode, so we're getting close to our 100th episode. Sarah, thanks for joining us. But before we formally introduce Sarah, our previous guest, Anna Kentsavelos, was on. What was one of the main takeaways you had when she was on our episode?
Sure. So for me, it was find someone that fits in your company culture when you're hiring. And when you're hiring that person, don't just hire on skills, but maybe hire on passion instead.
Right.
You can't teach someone passion.
Right.
So
yeah, because the one thing I wrote down is hire character over skill. Same to your point. Today's guest, we have Sarah Duran. Sarah is an operational expert who has spent over a decade helping people and organizations turn their ideas into action. On top of helping her business strategy expertise, she's also a coach who helps solopreneurs live up to their highest potential. She takes her expertise as a consistent six-figure freelancer and combines it with her background in curriculum design, facilitation, and coaching to give solopreneurs the support to get what they need out of their work every day. Everyone welcome Sarah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Joe, you want to start?
Sure. So let's just get into it to learn a little bit more about you. What are some early lessons learned as an entrepreneur?
I would say my early lesson that continues to be a lesson that I learned over and over and over again as an entrepreneur is that you have to be open to things that you didn't plan for. So I always say that the most amazing things that have happened in my business and my life, I never saw coming, which I know we'll get into a little bit more about goal setting, but that's why I keep myself open to possibility all the time, and set my goals in a way that are flexible so I can still be open to new possibilities.
Right. So we had the great pivot everyone happened when COVID happened, right? So you set goals, something like that happens, flips every business, entrepreneur, solopreneur kind of on its head. So we'll get into how you set those goals. Thanks for answering that. But what's the best piece of advice that you've been given?
The best piece of advice I've been given is that if you don't choose, someone will choose for you.
Right into it. Well, let me ask you this then. Why is marketing important?
I mean, I think that's connected to that piece of advice, because I think that when you're being intentional about marketing yourself and about your personal brand, about the way you're presenting yourself to the world, you're making the choice of how you show up instead of letting other people make assumptions about who you are, what you do, and how you work with people. And so I think just being super intentional about how you're showing up is really important. And I think marketing as a business owner is like the number one way that you're showing up in the world.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So before we move forward, something we're really proud of is our hashtag Valor Cares initiative. Joe, can you share some details on that, please?
So started out in the beginning of COVID, we just wanted a way to give back to business owners who may be struggling or just started. And the best way to do that is to help the foundation of their online presence, which is a website. Mm-hmm. So we give away free website builds every single month. People go to our website, apply, and we just keep building, keep knocking out free websites for businesses.
Cool. Thanks for that, Joe. Now we come to the part of our podcast, our Advanced Service Pump You Up quote of the day. I asked Sarah for a quote. I'll read it. A Ralph Waldo Emerson quote. Your genuine action will explain itself and will explain your other genuine actions. Your conformity explains nothing. So Sarah, why is that so important to you?
I mean, I think this is directly connected with the marketing question. I firmly believe that it's really important for everyone, but entrepreneurs especially, to be very aware of who they are as their most authentic self and make sure that they're showing up as their most authentic self all the time in the work that they do. Because that is the only way that you're going to be attracting the right people towards you. I think that in different circumstances and contexts, we can all get tricked into thinking that we have to show up in a certain way or be a certain type of person. And I have learned in my business and the people that I work with over and over again that is if you're not showing up authentically, then you're not attracting the right people to you or your business.
So do you see that a lot with the number one thing when people come to you is they just try to do what everyone else does? You know, because I see it with some of the real estate people, mortgage people I work with. They go to these workshops, they spend hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. They get the same message from the thing, like be authentic, but everyone's doing the same thing. I mean, you can't tell, you don't know who they are. It just shows like what they offer, but it's nothing like authentic. Is that one thing you see like pretty common when people come to you like, I need your help. You know, I don't know how to be authentic, or they're fake, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. The place that I realized like over the course of my coaching business with the people that I work with is that it happened over and over again that I was like, people would come to me and be like, I need to fix my business systems, or I need to fix my branding, or I need to fix my services and offerings. I need to figure out how to restructure them. And over again, what I discovered is that people, and this is true for my own business in the beginning too, we don't do the hard work of actually figuring out who we are or why we do our work or what we want to get out of it. And if you don't do that work first, then all of the marketing and branding workshops in the world aren't going to do anything for you because you're just going to continue to show up as everyone else. And so I think it's really important. And it's not like, I think those three questions, like who are you, why do you do what you do, and what do you want to get out of it, seem like simple questions, but they're actually questions that I think most people don't ask themselves. And so we end up building businesses that I think A, don't stand out in the world, and B, don't give us what we need in our own lives because we're just trying to do what everyone else is doing.
Got it. So with our solopreneurs out there in our audience specifically, is there one signal that they know they break the norm and like, I need to start doing this? You know, if they can't hire like a coach or something, is it one thing that you see that they do wrong or that they could figure out to do to kind of flip it and pivot to, you know, the path you set your customers on or your clients on?
Yeah, I mean, I think like going through a process of really understanding what for solopreneurs in particular, but I think this is true for all entrepreneurs. It just looks a little bit different when you have a team because then your business isn't just about you. It is also about the people that rely on you for your livelihood, their livelihood. So I think it gets a little bit broader when you talk about mission, vision, values with like more of a organization and not just a single person business. But I think doing that work in the beginning to really figure out what you need to get out of your business fundamentally drives the way, the structure of your business, which I think is like the primary thing that I focus on with people is like, how do you actually structure your business model to be reflective of your strengths, your talents, your preferences, your values, and make sure that every step of the way that is showing up in your business from all the way from how you acquire clients through your client engagement. How do you make sure that that is really indicative of who you are? And I think when you're a larger company, how do you make sure that that entire client experience is indicative of who your company is? What is the values of your company?
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Now we come to our Fuse Network's Did You Know segment. The Fuse tip of the day. Encryption is critical to the success of any business. In today's world of flexible working environments and conditions, you want to be intentional, that word again, with how you share and distribute access to your company's data. You'll need to ensure that you are not accidentally putting your data in harm's way due to outdated and insecure data retrieval policies and procedures. If your team doesn't operate from one single location, you'll have to be particularly careful with sending and receiving data from their locations. You can't control several internet connections and home networks, but you can control the way data is transmitted. Encryption is vital to keeping your data safe while it's being sent all over the place. Schedule your free consultation with Fuse, 855-GET-FUSE, 438-3873. All right. So our first myth that Sarah shared, smart goals work. So we know goals work, but enlighten us with the myth of smart goals work.
So I learned early on, both in my business and in the work that I do with the other entrepreneurs that I coach and work with every day, that people were setting long-term, quote unquote, smart goals with deadlines and numbers associated with them. And what would happen, and I think this happened to me before I went out on my own, you would set these goals with like your manager, you would come back and revisit them at like your annual review, and you would realize a couple of things. A, they were completely irrelevant. So like everything had changed. That goal was completely irrelevant. You probably shouldn't have, there's no point in even talking about it. B, you blow it out of the water because like you weren't actually like adjusting it as things progressed over time. Or C, you never even came close to it. Again, mostly because things change. And so the way that I have adapted to that in my own work and the work that I do with other entrepreneurs is to think about a system of short cycle planning where you're really never setting long-term goals. You might be setting longer term milestones so that you have something to aim for, but you're setting what I refer to as short cycle qualitative goals. So I'm helping people set goals that really focus on like, what does it look like and feel like to be successful? Not necessarily what are the numbers. The numbers can be helpful backup. So if you're like, I want to have 10 new clients by the end of the year, or I want to have, an extra, 10K a month coming in, those things are helpful targets to aim for. But if you're not actually clear, and I think this goes back to the whole conversation about like what you need to get out of your work, why you do your work, and who you are, is if you're not clear how those goals are connected to those three things, then they're going to be completely irrelevant. And you might be hitting or missing numeric goals, but actually achieving the kind of more qualitative goals that you set out for yourself. And so I think that the keys that I have found in goal setting are, again, making sure that you're thinking about what goals, what success looks like and feels like, and then making sure that you're setting these longer term milestones and then planning out your time in shorter term cycles. And so what I do for my own business is I'm only planning things out. Like, again, I have milestones for the entire year. I'm planning things out every quarter. And so quarterly, I'm really looking at like, what changed? Is this still the right goal? Is this still getting me to where I want to go on a more macro level? What do I need to add? What do I need to take off? And then how do I plan out the next quarter? Because a lot of times we make these long-term plans and then they end up getting thrown out the window. I mean, I think you brought up COVID. That it's a perfect example of sort of everyone in that period of time was like, oh man, things are really uncertain. Like, we have no idea what's about to happen. And I think that's actually always been true to a certain extent. We just like, it became very obvious in that instant. And so being able to, I think in shorter cycles actually makes your planning more reliable.
So I'm going to ask a quick question and maybe just break it down. What is a SMART goal?
What is a SMART goal?
Yes.
Okay, so a SMART goal is, see, now you're putting me on the spot.
I like that.
A SMART goal, I got the M, is measurable. See, now I have to look it up.
I don't know if there was a difference between just like setting regular goals or if there was a specific definition for like what a SMART goal actually is.
Yeah, so a SMART goal is a specific goal that is measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And so it has deadlines, it has numbers. So when you think about measurable, you're talking about metrics, and specifically numerical metrics. I mean, I think we've all had, well, I don't know, it depends on your journey if you've ever had like a quote-unquote 9-to-5 job working for someone else. But I had to set these all the time before I went out on my own, where they were like, what are your metrics? How are you going to achieve them? What is your plan? What is it going to look like a year from now? And then we always came back to it a year later, and it never looked how we said it was going to look.
You touched it a little bit, but this myth, long-term planning is crucial for success, where you kind of just flipped the script there and said, yeah, there's milestones you have, but then it's kind of the short cycle qualitative goals that kind of break it down, right? So before you aim for the top, you got to like climb the mountain. You got to get there, right? With little goals. Is that kind of like that same thought then?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I guess the other thing I would add to that, in addition to, what I already said around the different ways of thinking about your goals, is that I think the other thing that happens when you set long-term goals that are, again, smart, so like super focused on like, this is what success looks like. This is the one definition of success that is out there. You sort of have these blinders on where you're not able to see like alternate possibilities. And so a lot of like, you might be so focused on, I think this is what success looks like, that other ways of achieving success that might look differently from the plan that you set out, you're sort of being dismissive of them, or you're not seeing them, or you're not focusing on them because you have this like one definition of what things look like in the future. And so I think that having using this shorter term like qualitative goal setting philosophy also helps you to stay open to like what other possibilities might there be. I think especially as entrepreneurs, like I come across things, every day, every week, every month, and I'm like, oh, that might be an interesting, business idea. Like maybe there's something there, which if I'm only focused on one definition of success or what my business is going to look like in a year, I'm going to miss those opportunities.
All right. So how do you get to the core of what you want when you don't know what you want? So there's probably people listening in the audience fidgeting now because they got called out like, well, yeah, I know I need to set better goals, right? You typically do that at the beginning of the year, right? People have vision boards or goals, and then sometimes they don't pivot, or sometimes they don't know what they want. They may go in a different direction. Like you said earlier, try to align your strengths with how you want your business to do, but sometimes they get caught in a cycle. Joe and I have seen this. I've seen it personally. Mm-hmm. Business owners do certain things that they think they're good at, but they're strong at doing other things, and there may be either opportunities left on the table, or you should be doing like 80% of this of your business as opposed to 20%, but they get caught in the rut. So how do you, when you work with a client like that to get to the core of what they want, but they don't know what you want, where does that start? So let's just have a situation where Joe and I have a company. We've had it for 5 years, pivoted through the pandemic. We do well at one thing, but he may have different goals and I may have different goals. How would you work with a business or a client like that?
So when I do it with an individual, and then I'll shift up a level and tell you how I do it with a business. Okay. When I do it with like an individual, and specifically like more of a smaller, like one person business, is really starting out with like, again, that who piece of it. So like, who are you? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do you like? What do you not like? Like pretty simple questions, right? But again, it's like questions that I think we don't really pause to ask ourselves those type of questions. I think the other thing that for individuals can be super helpful is any type of like strengths or personality assessment. I think like lots of us have done all kinds of different ones of those. So those are always helpful. From that layer, when I do it with a business, really what it is sort of like auditing the strengths and weaknesses of a business. And so I have like an audit process that I'll do with companies that is really sort of taking both that question up a level into the business, like what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of your company? Where do you think you're best positioned? And then there's also like structural questions around that. So like where do you think that your structures are working well? What products and services do you think are performing the best? And I think especially with a small business, even if it's like a partnership, you're still looking at the founders or the leaders of that company and helping them think about like, how is this checking the boxes in your own life as well? Because I think whether you're a single person business or not, those questions are still really important. From there, at an individual level, and I think this can be true for a company too. So again, I'll start at the individual and then go up. for an individual, there's a few reasons why like we think we know what we want and we don't, whether that's like we want what society wants us to want, we want what our parents want us to want, or like our family, our partner, or we're just like ashamed to admit that we want things. So like we're trying to like maintain this like selfless persona, and we actually are ashamed of even thinking about like, hey, I actually really want this, and like that's okay. So I think the first thing for individuals, like getting over some of those hurdles, like you are allowed to want things. You are allowed to want things for yourself. You are allowed to do things because you want them. So some of those mindset pieces are really important at the individual level. And then on the business level, I think you're taking it and you're aligning the leaders of the business have to be super self-aware of that kind of stuff to make sure that that's coming through in the way they interact in their company. And for the business, you're using sort of that short cycle planning methodology to think about, okay, you're here based on like the audit of all of the things of where your business stand now, sort of the who of where your business is. What is the next step based on, and that can be a variety of factors when you have a larger company. What is the next step for the founders or the leaders of the business? How are you thinking about the rest of your team and what they need and want to do moving forward? That calculation gets a little bit trickier when you are doing it with a larger company, because again, it's not just about what one person wants. It's really about where the business is heading. And the strategy for doing that is actually pretty simple. I think if you're interacting with a coach, it can manifest in a variety of different ways. But I think the easiest way to do it is, like the 5 whys, which I think we probably all heard of. Just asking yourself why until you can't ask yourself why anymore. And if you're asking yourself what you want, ask yourself why you want that. And if you fundamentally don't get down to the answer of like, that is an answer that's intrinsic to you, then maybe you don't actually want it. Maybe someone else wanted it for you. Because I think going back to goal setting, a lot of times what I see with people where they're like, hey, I want to do this, and then they never do it. So they never take the steps to do it. What it comes down to a lot of times is I'm like, I don't think you actually want that. Like you think you want that, but I'm not sure that you actually do.
Wow. So we've come across that a lot. So even talking with customers, it just relates that I could just that exact situation. People kind of get like the blinded by the light, like they think they want something and then they don't really want it. When we set like marketing goals with clients, like, hey, we want to grow your business. Well, they may not, they say these things, but sometimes there's no follow through and everything. So for any of our audience, fellow solopreneurs, entrepreneurs that want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out to you and connect with you?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is my website, which is fruitioninitiatives.com. I have a blog, I have a Substack. You can find all of my channels and links and everything there. So yeah, that's the best place to find me.
So real quick then, I'm just curious for the audience, let them know how you got started in doing what you're doing.
Oh, great question. It was really going back to like the best things in my life I never saw coming. I had basically just like quit my 9-to-5 job because I was like, this isn't making me happy anymore. And I was doing a bunch of things that like I thought I wanted, and turns out I didn't want them. And then I started doing contract work, just picking up some contract work, doing what I had been doing before, and while I figured out my next step. And turned out that worked out pretty well. The contract worked, kept getting me more contract work, more referrals, more repeat business. And I ended up incorporating my company. That was about 8 years ago. And that's like more the like direct client facing side of my company, which is project management and business strategy. And then I've been coaching freelancers and sort of creating content for freelancers and solopreneurs, the blogs, courses, coaching, all that kind of stuff, really over the last 3 years, because I realized that working for myself had given me this level of like freedom and fulfillment that I never knew was possible. And I wanted to be able to help other people get the same thing.
Awesome. I'm going to ask one more question because you brought up content. What's your thoughts right now on AI and how it relates to writing content and still having that human touch to it versus just having AI and programming it?
I mean, so I think AI can be a helpful tool. In the platform that I use for my courses, I realized that they just introduced this thing where like you put in a course topic and it will like generate a course for you. And the first time I saw that, I was like, if AI can generate your course for you, then you shouldn't be making it. Like if people can basically just like Google whatever you're about to charge them for in your course, then you shouldn't be making it. And so I still think that there's a crucial place for entrepreneurs of all, I think, types and categories, to be able to leverage it to, I think, work smarter, but also be able to like really get focused on like, what is the value add that we all have to bring to the table that isn't something that a robot can just duplicate. I think that's a very simple answer. I also have a lot of friends who are freelance writers, course creators, content creators. And I know that it also puts them in a super tricky position where people, you know, can do something cheaper than hire them. But I still think that if you are more focused on the strategic and really like deep content pieces of what you're doing, and if you're an expert in your field, then there's no robot that's going to be able to replicate that.
Awesome. Great answer.
Yeah.
So before we close, one last plug for our hashtag Valor Cares initiative, Joe.
Yeah. So if your company needs a website and you're not sure where to start, just go to our website, askvalormasterminds.com, click on the Valor Cares, and submit your company to have a free website built.
Awesome. So Sarah, thanks for joining us today. A lot of great insight. It's not just goals on the front side. There's a lot behind it. And I think it's a lot of good conversation. I encourage our audience, if something resonates with you, to reach out to Sarah and see if she could help you out, or get like just contact her and maybe she'll answer a question or something. Any last thoughts, Joe?
No, I think it was a good episode.
Awesome. So on behalf of our sponsors, A Advanced Services and Fuse Networks, my name's Galen.
I'm Joe.
Coming at you from the Creative Block in Seattle. New location, new studio. Thanks for watching this episode of the Ask Valor Masterminds podcast. Thanks, guys.